With the Steelers preseason finale just a day away, I've got the Steelers injury updates for you guys on today's show. We got three pretty big ones for you. And then also, I'm going to be making a case, a devil's advocate case for Jaylen Warren as the running back one of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then also, Colin Cowherd absolutely disrespected the Pittsburgh Steelers and Kenny Pickett on the show this week. I'm going to expose him for the fraud that he is in just a second. But first, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is the perfect time to do so because we're going to be having watch parties live here on the channel for every single Steelers game during the 2023 season, including tomorrow's preseason finale against the Atlanta Falcons. So make sure you click that subscribe button right now if you don't want to miss a single moment here live at Steelers Talk Live. All right, now let's get into the injury report for this week's game against the Falcons, starting with offensive guard Kevin Dotson, who is out with a shoulder injury. Now, some people are speculating, this means that Kevin might get cut here towards the start of the 2023 regular season. I see that as very unlikely. He's somebody that started for this team last year. It seems like he has bought in to his new role as a backup offensive guard. And despite this injury here, I do expect him to be on the 53-man roster, but he won't be on the field in Atlanta tomorrow night. Then somebody that we've been really covering closely here over the last couple of weeks of training camp, Larry Ogunjobi, was in a walking boot last week for most of it. He is questionable to play with a foot/ankle injury. I think that if he's not 100%, he shouldn't be out there. Make him, get this full recovery going so that he's as healthy as possible. But if he's good to go, I definitely don't mind him getting a drive or two on defense. And then finally, Nate Herbig said to the media today that he is looking forward to potentially playing against the Falcons. He practiced in a limited fashion at the Steelers facility at practice today, and he's questionable to go with a shoulder injury that he's been dealing with here over the last couple of weeks and days. And I think that he should play, and I think that he's going to get backup center reps above Kendrick Green, who has not looked very good. And that's really going to be one of my biggest questions heading into tomorrow night. Who's going to end up being the backup center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, just in case Mason Cole gets hurt? Now, they have a couple of options here. That you could move Isaac Seumalo or James Daniels, who have both played center in their career. You could move either one of those guys over, but I don't think that's what the Steelers want to do. So who is the best option to replace Mason Cole if he ends up getting hurt? Nate Herbig is certainly somebody that has played center before in his career. He's an option. Kendrick Green, as much as people want to rag on him, he is still listed as the second team center. So, there's that. Then you got Spencer Anderson, who has the versatility to play inside. He's spent a little bit of time practicing at center, but it hasn't necessarily been good time during training camp. He's been more productive as a tackle to this point. And then Ryan McCollum, he's probably a for sure cut candidate in my eyes. I do not see Ryan making this final 53-man roster. I don't really see him as a potential member of this 53-man roster moving forward. For me, I'm probably going to go with Nate Herbig, but let me know who you think is going to be that backup center for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Or maybe do you think they should go out in free agency and get somebody like a Ben Jones who's still available, former starter with the Tennessee Titans? Let me know who you think who the backup center should be for your Pittsburgh Steelers down there in the comments section. And this is going to be the pinned comment on today's show. So YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. Take advantage of that time by answering today's pinned question. And like I said, man, my pick right now, if you're not going into free agency, it's going to be Nate Herbig. I think that Big Herbig, is somebody that has played center before. He's a very menacing presence there in the middle. He's not going to be very easy to get around. He's going to be a real rock in the middle of that offensive line if Mason Cole does end up going down with an injury, or if he just sucks, which I don't really see happening. But I don't think I want to move Isaac Seumalo or James Daniels away from the guard position. I think that both of those guys are going to be near all-pro caliber, Pro Bowl caliber guards this year. And if Mason Cole goes down, I don't want to move them from their given positions. And I would probably go with Nate Herbig, who I am a believer in. Now let's shift over to the debate between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, which has been waged on Twitter here, or X, or whatever you want to call it, over the last couple of days and weeks. And, it really comes because Najee Harris hasn't gotten a whole lot of time in practice or in preseason games. And in that time, Jaylen Warren is taking most of the snaps with the first team offense, and he's looked really, really good. Now, I will say right off the top that I think Najee Harris should be the number one running back heading into the season, but there is definitely a case to be made that Jaylen Warren should be this team's number one running back, and that by the end of the season, he could be that number one option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that argument really stems from the analytical side of things. Now, I think that you need to have a little bit of a marriage between the eye test, so to speak, film study, and the sabermetric analytics. But I love diving into these numbers because it shows me how valuable players are to a given offense. And last year, Jaylen Warren had a higher points above replacement than Najee Harris, even though he had over 200 less snaps. So Jaylen Warren was a more valuable player for the Steelers offense overall, despite only having 105 touches throughout the season, as opposed to Najee Harris's 313 touches. So, of course, that combines rushing attempts with catches out of the backfield. And I think that Warren's value really came from the pass-catching element of things. And I think that Warren is more of an exterior player that can bounce outside. He's more shifty. And last year, I think that overall, these numbers show that he was the more valuable player than Najee Harris. But, you look at what Najee was dealing with. He was dealing with injuries. He's more of an in-between-the-tackles type of player, so the explosive plays aren't necessarily going to be there at high of a rate than what it was with Jaylen Warren in 2022. But Jaylen Warren was almost 4 times as valuable per touch than Najee Harris was in 2022. So you look at these numbers here, and if we're going to assume that Jaylen Warren got better here in year 2, and I'm certainly going into that assumption because he's looked great in the preseason, that means the pressure is definitely on Najee Harris to perform this year. And now for the record, right, I brought these numbers to you that Jaylen Warren could potentially be the better back here when it's all said and done. But I think to start the season, you do have to give Najee Harris his fair shot. He hasn't had really great offensive line play throughout his career, right? So you want to give him this shot with this new and improved offensive line, see what he's got. And listen, if Jaylen keeps lighting it up from that number 2 running back spot, and you need to adjust mid-season and kind of make him the bell cow here in this offense, I think that's fine. And, there's people out there that think that Jaylen Warren can't be a number 1 back in this league because he's too small. I want to push back on that because you got smaller backs in this league that absolutely are bona fide number 1 options. Just look at Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey. I mean, both of those guys are smaller backs, and those guys are getting an insane amount of touches per season. So I think that if the Steelers need to make that move, they absolutely can. But I want to see what Najee Harris can do because he's a big boy. He can still move, and he's a very talented individual. So I'm not ready to give up on Najee just yet. But having a guy like Jaylen Warren in there, man, is definitely a good thing for Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and it definitely raises the floor for this Steelers run game in 2023. Now, coming up here, I'm going to be breaking down Colin Cowherd's latest comments on Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers and how he says that they can't win a Super Bowl with Kenny Pickett as their quarterback. Going to be breaking down what he said here in just a second. But first, go to chatsports.com/bet, where our friends at BetUS are offering you guys a 125% deposit bonus when you use promo code Steelers125. Now, what does that mean exactly, you might be asking? And here's what it is. You put in a deposit of $100 to $600. They're going to give you 125% of that money back to you to use on your bets. So, for example, you put in $100, they're going to give you an additional $125 to use on your bets, so $225 total. And you might as well use that on this week's preseason game against the Falcons, man. It's always fun to bet on preseason games. It makes it a little bit more juicy, makes it a little bit more enjoyable to watch because these games don't matter towards the regular season record. So why not, man? So go down to chatsports.com/bet and use promo code Steelers125 to get your hands on that 125% deposit bonus today. All right, so now let's break down these ridiculous comments from Colin Cowherd this week on Kenny Pickett and the Steelers overall. This is what he had to say. When he was asked if Kenny Pickett could lead this team to a Super Bowl, he says no, and go through Burrow and Allen and Lamar and Mahomes and Russell and Peyton, talking about Sean Payton, I'm putting them in a category of could win a playoff game. Continues to say here, he's not going to Arrowhead and then Cincinnati and Buffalo and Baltimore. I don't see greatness. I see very good. I think Kenny Pickett has a chance to be a very good quarterback. Good B-plus guy, maybe a little more mobile than Kirk Cousins, a much more accurate throwing Dak Prescott. Pittsburgh's history is they go to the Super Bowl and win them with a great quarterback in his physical prime. I see Kenny Pickett as a good quarterback about a year away from his physical prime. Now, I think that these comments just simply show that Colin Cowherd doesn't know ball. First of all, Dak Prescott is one of the more accurate quarterbacks in the National Football League. That is a known fact, so I don't know why he's saying that as part of his argument. But then also, I think that this really points to one of the biggest misconceptions about Kenny Pickett, which is that people think he's a Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott pocket quarterback kind of guy. And that's not really his game. He's more of a playmaker. He's more comfortable outside the pocket making plays, throwing on the run than he is within the pocket. In fact, I've been saying all offseason that some of his biggest issues in his game that he had to fix was the in-pocket stuff, the footwork, the ability to step up in the pocket, the pocket presence, the ability to dice teams up from within the pocket and go through his mental processing and do all that sort of stuff. That's the stuff that he really needed to get better at this offseason. I think that he's done that, and because of that, I think that he's a guy that can both kill you from within the pocket and outside the pocket, and I think that potentially raises his ceiling higher than guys like Dak Prescott and Kirk Cousins. And I do think that they can win a Super Bowl here, meaning the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they absolutely can win a Super Bowl with Kenny Pickett. If he ends up making those adjustments within the pocket, he remains as accurate as he was last season, especially down the field, and he continues to play really good football outside the pocket as a playmaker. That's really his bread and butter. And if he adds that in-pocket element to his game, he's going to be a really solid quarterback in this league. And people think because he doesn't have the strongest arm in the world and he's not the fastest runner in the world, because he's not the most dynamic talent out there, that he's somehow limited to just being like a Kirk Cousins type of quarterback. But that's not true. I absolutely think, especially with the elite defense that the Steelers have and the offensive weaponry they have around him, I think Kenny Pickett could absolutely be a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, at least someday. Now, let me know down there in the comment section what you think. Can the Steelers win a Super Bowl with Kenny Pickett as their quarterback? Give me an HY if you think hell yes, or if you think hell no, give me an HN down there in the comment section. Now, if you want to become an expert on the Pittsburgh Steelers, this is going to be the place for you. We got daily content here on the Black and Gold, where we're going to be breaking down everything in depth throughout the season, film analysis. I'm going to be doing all this different kind of stuff throughout the season, injury reports, everything that there is to know about the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2023. We're going to have you covered here on Steelers Talk, along with our weekly live shows, along with our weekly watch parties. We're going to be giving you guys the most comprehensive Steelers fan experience here on the platform, 100% free. So if you haven't already, do me a favor and click that subscribe button right now.